There is a powerful group inside the Catholic Church.
We are God's hands. We are the people to do God's work.
It's called Opus Dei.
This Pope was pointing his finger at this group and saying, this is the way to go.
In the best-selling novel The Da Vinci Code, they're portrayed as villains.
It hurts me to see my family of Opus Dei be treated like some kind of mafia, which is ridiculous.
In real life, they've been called secretive and cult-like.
You give up your life, you give up any money, you give up everything.
It was a fear of hell that allowed me to stay for so long.
Their rituals of self-torture have drawn intense scrutiny.
I don't do it because I like it. I do it because I dislike it.
This has forced Opus Dei to speak out.
We have a message that society wants to hear. We want to get our message across.
Just what is the truth behind Opus Dei? It began in 1928 with a divine inspiration experienced by a devout Spanish priest.
He felt God was calling him to create this new body composed of men at first, later, through another vision, men and women, priests and laity, and that the point would be not to do things in a church, but to get out into the street.
Following what he believed was God's holy call, Father Jose Maria Escrivá formed a new Catholic group. He would later name it Opus Dei, which in Latin means work of God. But even after its controversial founder was made a Catholic saint in 2002, many Americans were unaware of Opus Dei. That is, until the Da Vinci Code was published a year later. The Da Vinci Code is a grand fictional conspiracy where art, Christianity, history, and murder collide. Written by Dan Brown, the novel has sold over 40 million copies worldwide.
It's one of these very entertaining, fantastic, wild sort of page turners that, is fun to read when you're on an airplane for 2.5 hours.
Brown writes that hidden inside the extraordinary art of Italian master Leonardo da Vinci lies a code that reveals a mysterious and powerful secret. The book asserts that Mary Magdalene gave birth to Jesus' child, and that for centuries the Catholic Church has concealed the truth.
Inconceivable, preposterous, the things that he says as facts in the book about history. The sad thing is that many people get confused in this kind of type of faction, this mystery of fact and fiction, and people can't distinguish.
Straddling that fact-fiction divide is the novel's depiction of Opus Dei. The Da Vinci Code connects a dark global conspiracy to the deep sanctums of the group. Its leader is portrayed as a diabolical villain. At the center of this sinister plot is a menacing Opus Dei monk who kills on demand.
Imagine any other religious organization being named in a book like that and said that they do those kinds of things. People would be outraged, and yet, because Opus Dei, I think, is this conservative Catholic group, somehow that's just sort of been ignored.
As a Catholic, it hurts me to see Jesus kind of dragged through the mud in a certain kind of way, as he is in the book. It hurts me to see my family of Opus Dei be treated like it's some kind of mafia, which is ridiculous.
The Da Vinci Code also dramatically introduces the controversial ritual of corporal mortification.
Castigo corpus meum.
Hollywood has focused its own glaring spotlight on Opus Dei in the film version of the Da Vinci Code, starring Tom Hanks and directed by Ron Howard. For millions, the Da Vinci Code has created their only image of Opus Dei, some of it rooted in fact, some in pure fiction, but has a clear public picture yet to emerge. Rome, Italy. In the middle of this magical metropolis is Vatican City, home to the Roman Catholic Church. Beyond the Vatican walls, there are over 1 billion Catholics globally. More than half the world's Christians are Catholics. Within this vast church, you'll find religious orders like the Jesuits, the Dominicans, and lay organizations like the Knights of Columbus and Opus Dei.
Opus Dei is a way to have a relationship with God in your everyday life. Not just on Sunday, but every day through every moment and every circumstance.
The spiritual message of Opus Dei is that one can find God in work and daily life, that lay people in their regular secular professions can pursue a saintly life, a holier life, and thereby transform the world around them.
Try and help somebody else.
If you are a faithful, believing, conservative Catholic, sometimes you don't even feel at home in your own parish. You may not feel at home with your own friends. What Opus Dei gives you is an environment in which you feel at home.
Opus Dei has 87,000 members in 61 countries. Its membership is comprised mostly of lay people, doctors, firefighters, farmers, salesmen. Some married, some celibate. 2% are clergy, including priests, bishops, and 2 cardinals. But no nuns and no monks.
I think the most important thing that Opus Dei has done for me is to help me understand the right balance that my life should have. The right balance between work, family, being a husband, golfing, and my faith in God.
These deeply faithful Catholics, sometimes called Orthodox Catholics, follow a rigorous daily routine of Mass, prayer, and spiritual formation.
It's not signing up at, a health club. Being a member of Opus Dei is a divine vocation, so God calls that person. Many people come into contact with Opus Dei, attended their activities, and don't join, because it isn't for everyone.
John Allen is the Vatican correspondent for the National Catholic Reporter and author of a recent book on Opus Dei.
There are all kinds of Catholic liberals around the world who have never met an Opus Dei member, never been to an Opus Dei center, never read a book by Escrivá, who nevertheless are profoundly convinced that Opus Dei is something evil.
Over the years, some have charged that Opus Dei is a secret and clandestine cult, that it recruits aggressively, that it has vast sums of money, and that it controls the Vatican.
What I am doing is pointing out something that I believe is like a cancer. They ruin people's lives and tear families apart. That is not a Christian thing to do.
On the one hand, you have thousands of very holy and healthy Catholics living devoted lives of service in the modern world, which is terrific. On the other hand, there are some problems with Opus Dei that really need to be looked at.
So how did this small group and its enigmatic founder become the lightning rod of controversy in the Catholic Church? Vatican City, September 2005. In an exterior niche alongside St. Peter's Basilica, a 5-meter-high marble statue of Opus Dei's founder, Saint Jose Maria Escrivá, is unveiled and blessed by Pope Benedict XVI during a special Vatican ceremony. The prelate of Opus Dei, the institution's worldwide head and only its 3rd leader, is Spanish Bishop Javier Echevarria, a member since 1948, close friend and personal secretary to Escrivá. He behaved on earth as he surely is now behaving in heaven, with the perfection that is truly only given to the souls that enjoy God's vision. The image of his statue, which we contemplate upon today, is an eloquent sign of such a vision. A riveting figure in life, Escrivá and the history of Opus Dei are inseparable. Spain, a European country of some 42 million people, 94% of whom are Catholic. In 1902, Jose Maria Escrivá de Balaguer was born into a devout Catholic family. As a pious teenager, Escrivá entered the seminary, and at the age of 23, Jose Maria was ordained a priest.
He was a person with a tremendous faith able to do anything to accomplish or to follow that faith.
The turning point in Escrivá's life came on October 2nd, 1928. During a retreat in Madrid, he heard the ringing of church bells and experienced a vision. He believed it was a supernatural intervention from God. This vision would become Opus Dei. I love Opus Dei with all my heart, as it is an instrument to serve the Church, to serve souls, to contribute to peace and happiness of all peoples, the well-being of the world.
Per fare un'opera della portata dell'Opus Dei,
To do work of the magnitude of Opus Dei, you need strong instruments. To have balance, there needs to be a sense of battle, but also, at the same time, much humility. In 1933, Escrivá created the first home for Opus Dei in a small Madrid apartment. Called the DYA Academy, it became a residence, a center of apostolic activities, and a study hall for college students.
Hardly anyone was joining Opus Dei, and those who did, some of them didn't stick around. And he's talking about Opus Dei as something that God has given to the Church and that will last for centuries and forever. He's just a Spanish priest living in Madrid with a handful of people around him. And now that takes incredible faith.
As Escrivá nurtured his infant spiritual group, Spain was embroiled in turmoil. Political, economic, and cultural disputes divided Spaniards. Civil unrest erupted into civil war.
July 1936. The Spanish Civil War became a proving ground for Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Soviet Russia.
The nationalists, conservative and mostly Catholic, led by Generalissimo Francisco Franco, launched a rebellion against the Republican communist leftists that quickly cut Spain in half.
In the Republican side, priests were persecuted. That is a fact, and they were killed.
Brutal religious persecutions ensued. Churches were burned, clergy were hunted.
You're coming out of a period in which anybody who was a practicing Catholic in Spain probably had the experience of having to step over bodies to get to church. There were 4,000 priests who were killed, dozens of bishops, hundreds of sisters, in some cases lined up against walls in very public ways and shot to death by the Republican forces.
Forced underground, Escrivá lived as a religious refugee, in fear and on the run. He found safe haven in this attic. He posed as a mental patient in an asylum for 5 months. Through it all, Escrivá secretly celebrated masses and heard confessions.
He was carrying on his apostolic work as if nothing had happened, that he had the sense that he was doing something God wanted him to do, and that nothing could stand in his way.
In March 1939, the nationalists emerged victorious. Franco seized power as dictator and brutally ruled Spain for the next 36 years.
People had paid in their own blood for their fidelity to the church. And so there was an enormous upsurge of Catholic pride, and there was an enormous upsurge of Spanish nationalism tied in the symbol of Franco.
Escrivá and Opus Dei have been repeatedly accused of supporting Franco's fascist and repressive reign. It is logical that the Church felt closer at a certain time towards those who did not attack it. This is the reality. It is not a political option. It is an option of survival of faith.
I think the fairest thing you can say is that Escrivá was neither pro-Franco nor anti-Franco. It's a fair matter for debate that he should have been more anti-Franco, particularly as the injustices of the regime became clear. He was trying to follow his vision, and his vision was that as an organization, Opus Dei was simply going to stay out of the political fray.
On the day the war ended, Escrivá stood among the ruins of the DYA Academy. But 3 years of ugly civil war had not destroyed his vision for Opus Dei. Later in 1939, Escrivá published The Way, his book of 999 short passages known as maxims. If you don't get up at a set hour, you'll never fulfill your plan of life. Obedience, the sure way, blind obedience to your superior, the way of sanctity.
He was writing things to encourage at specific moments, this soul, that soul, and he was coming up with ideas that would help those people.
The Way reveals the spiritual blueprint of Escrivá and Opus Dei, featuring topics like character, prayer, and tactics, with an emphasis on the group's privacy. Be slow to reveal the intimate details of your apostolate. Don't you see that the world in its selfishness will fail to understand?
It is a foundational document for them. There isn't anything else. He did write a lot of other books later on in life, but this is the one that I would have thought that they carried in their pocket. It's the Opus Dei's equivalent of Chairman Mao's Little Red Book.
In 1941, Opus Dei had 50 members. In Madrid's Catholic community, word spread of an isolated and clandestine group of Catholics.
There's been misunderstanding about what Opus Dei is about. This looks like they're being secret, but they're not really secret. They are just normal Christians. And people are unfamiliar with this way of doing holiness.
That way of holiness was attracting attention. Opus Dei was growing. The Society of Jesus, known as the Jesuits, had an enormous presence in Spain's fervent Catholic Church. They were suspicious and opposed to Opus Dei's growth.
The root charge was that Opus Dei was a secret Catholic sect that was attempting to destroy the Jesuits, was attempting to divide the parishes, and somehow take control of the Spanish Church. The great historical irony here, of course, is that many of the same charges were made against the Jesuits back in the 16th century when they were founded, and they were the new kid on the block.
Undeterred, Escrivá sought recognition beyond Spain.
Escrivá knew that if he was going to expand anywhere, he had really to become a pontifically, a papally approved institution. In order to do this, he needed to go to Rome. So he sent his right-hand man, Álvaro del Portillo, to work towards a recognition.
But let's not kid ourselves. I mean, in part, it was also to be present at court, to learn the rhythms and the psychology of Vatican politics, to be able to make points. Opus Dei's leadership has always been very adroit at knowing how to move the levers of power.
With the blessing of Pope Pius XII, Opus Dei was granted permission to expand worldwide. The message of Opus Dei took root. From the 1950s through the 1970s, some 60,000 members could be found in 32 countries, including the United States. Colleges were founded by Opus Dei members. Apostolic activities and charitable projects were launched. Leading this campaign of remarkable growth was Escrivá, charismatic, magnetic, and passionate.
I don't think that you can explain the dramatic worldwide diffusion of Opus Dei in a very short arc of time without there having been something about this man that attracted people.
When you get a highly charismatic person who founds a new movement, there tends to be reverence for that person. In the case of Escrivá, it seems as if he encouraged it. He certainly didn't discourage it.
On June 26, 1975, following a morning meeting with women members, Escrivá returned to Villa Tevere, the Opus Dei global headquarters in Rome, collapsed in this room, and died of heart failure. He was 73. I have to thank God for these 50 years of work. Like a little donkey, I find myself before God, pulling the cart. This has been the job I've devoted myself to. Father Álvaro del Portillo, a former railway engineer turned priest, succeeded Escrivá as the prelate of Opus Dei. He appeared in delight when the founder died. We all understood that he was the worthy successor. Today, deep below the street within the Our Lady of Peace Chapel in Villa Tevere, encased in glass lie the remains of Saint Jose Maria Escrivá.
It was just incredible that he could be fiery, he could be funny, he was warm, a man who was really a volcano of love of God.
He would mention the weight that he felt on his shoulders being the founder of Opus Dei.
He knew that he has to accomplish God's will.
I've always thought he was a saint, very, very holy.
However, Escrivá's detractors have painted a more critical portrait, a dark side.
He was very volatile. He had a mean temper. He could be nasty to people, especially to subordinates.
His reprimands were very serious and were strong, and he has a forceful character.
He's always struck me, he came across to me as a vain man, very concerned about his self-image, very concerned really about that people should know that he was a holy man.
My children, My words are spiritual words, words of love for everyone. I've never in my life wished evil upon anyone. I only want what's good for everyone.
If you think of him as a loving father, then you tend to forgive them and just sort of, chalk it up to him being a character. If you think of him as somebody who's running a secretive, controlling organization, then you would see it as another kind of, deep-seated personality flaw.
Today, Escriva's greatest legacy is Opus Dei's 87,000 members, but many of their practices have raised suspicion and skepticism. Today, among America's 67 million Catholics, there are 3,000 members of Opus Dei. These conservative Catholics are few in number, but familiar as your next-door neighbor.
I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a plastic surgeon, and I am a member of Opus Dei.
I am Vice President of Human Resources.
I'm a college president.
I'm an educator, a coach.
I'm a retired guy. I'm an engineer. I run around a lot.
You get the full gamut, I think, of personalities and professions. The one thing we have in common is we want to live our faith on a serious basis every day.
So how does one become an Opus Dei member?
Most members of Opus Dei, their first encounter is not through sensationalist TV programs or newspaper articles. It's through reading the works of Escrivá, introduced to them by other believing Catholics.
Opus Dei also actively recruits Catholic college students who are invited to attend retreats and other spiritually themed gatherings.
Evangelization is a mission of the church. It's not something that Opus Dei invented. Every Christian is called to evangelize. We're called to spread the message of Christ.
People have charged over the years that they are deceptive about it, that they will sometimes bring people into their orbit before really telling them that this is Opus Dei, that they will pressure them to make profound life commitments before they really understand what it's about.
We were always being encouraged to get more members, make friends, bring them into formation somehow, bring them around the center, try to find out where they are in their spiritual life. Do they have the qualities to become a member of Opus Dei?
Opus Dei denies that it exerts any undue pressure. They say potential candidates endure a lengthy period of spiritual study before gaining full membership.
From the very first formation that I went to, I wanted to join Opus Dei immediately, and they wouldn't let me. They said, not yet, slow down, take your time, you need to learn more about us.
When someone joins Opus Dei, they have a 6.5-year period in which they say, yes, I want to go ahead for another year, I do not want to go ahead for another year. So they are free to remain in the work and they're free to leave.
There are a variety of membership categories. There's the supernumerary, 70% of the total membership comprised of married couples like Doug and Shirley Hinderer, with their family of 9 children.
I look at Catholicism as a framework for our life, and I think I look at Opus Dei almost as the color in it. It really helped us to look at who we were in more than just a couple and more than just a parent. I mean, it gave us a really well-rounded look at our lives as human beings, as Catholics, as parents.
They have a program of life, a spiritual program that they follow every day as Opus Dei members. They come together once a week for a kind of spiritual meditation and talk. The point is to receive the spiritual formation inside Opus Dei and then take that formation out into one's daily life.
The next largest category consists of the numerary. Nearly 30% celibate males and females who live in Opus Dei centers, and whose vows of celibacy are a unique commitment in today's modern world.
These people have chosen to live a fairly controlled and disciplined life of spiritual sacrifice. If you've chosen to live that life, you've got to take it on its own terms. And by definition, that's going to be something that's hard for the outside world to understand.
A numerary member of Opus Dei usually has a profession which he exercises. I am a singer. I also conduct a choir. And then I'm involved in apostolic activities and also give spiritual guidance to some members of Opus Dei.
Much of that spiritual guidance takes place in the 60 Opus Dei centers in 19 cities across America. In New York, there's Murray Hill Place, the U.S. headquarters for Opus Dei. A $69 million building built with gifted pharmaceutical stock. Male and female members are completely segregated. There are separate entrances and residences.
we find that that works. We interface with men and women all the time. It's simply that our activities are done separately, and we live in a separate environment.
We are a family to each other. It's like having 10 sisters that you actually get along with and don't steal their clothes. You know, we share all of the great ideals in common.
The numerary assistant is a distinct class of only women, some 5%, whose main tasks include the cooking, cleaning, and administration of Opus Dei centers.
They are homemakers, and they would see themselves playing the same role to the Opus Dei community as a regular mom does to her own family. And so for them, they see it as something that is extraordinarily fulfilling, not at all demeaning, and something that gives them great satisfaction.
Blessed art thou among women. And
it is their rigorous daily routine that separates Opus Dei's members from other Catholic lay organizations. Members attend Mass and receive communion daily. Prayer is constant.
Holy Mary, Mother of God,
now and at the hour of our death.
Members recite a customized Opus Dei prayer in Latin called the Preces. The numeraries are Opus Dei's frontline spiritual soldiers who are available full-time to the organization. They are expected to give more than their hearts. They're expected to give most of their paycheck from their regular jobs.
All the numeraries of Opus Dei, we receive a salary and we pay from our salary. Obviously, we pay for our personal needs, you know, whatever our expenses may be. And as a rule, we give everything else to supporting Opus Dei and the apostolates.
In their defense, that's what the apostles did. The apostles lived sort of communally. The early Christian church did that. They cared for one another. So, in a sense, you could say they're living more Christian than other Catholics are.
Perhaps the most controversial aspect of life in Opus Dei is the practice of corporal mortification, acts of self-denial or voluntary pain as penance, a kind of bodily sacrifice.
Amen. I think the first thing to understand about corporal mortification is that it is a spiritual discipline with a rich and long history in the Catholic Church, and that it is practiced by plenty of people outside Opus Dei. Mother Teresa used a small whip. Padre Pio used the hair shirt and the whip and the scillas. And it has always been understood by a certain kind of Catholic spirituality as a way to participate in the suffering of Christ on the cross. Secondly, as a reminder of the pain and suffering of the world, and a kind of taming of the flesh.
In the Da Vinci Code, the villain monk Silas practices a painful and bloody form of mortification. By most accounts, the Da Vinci Code's portrayal is exaggerated.
I think if they're getting their idea of what it is from the Da Vinci Code, I don't blame them for being repulsed. I'm repulsed by that.
Opus Dei's use of corporal mortification is traced directly to its founder. Unless you mortify yourself, you'll never be a prayerful soul. Blessed be pain, loved be pain, sanctified be pain, glorified be pain. Simple mortifications include everyday sacrifices such as fasting, cold showers, and sleeping on floors or wood boards without pillows.
A mortification is basically doing something that you really don't want to do, but you do it for the glory of God.
But it is the more extreme forms of mortification practiced by the numeraries that draw the most scrutiny.
These are the corporal mortification instruments that are used in Opus Dei. This is the discipline. They use it on their bare buttocks while they recite a Hail Mary. The scillas is like a barbed wire chain. They tie this around their thigh. They're encouraged to tie it tightly so that it digs into the skin. And they wear this for 2 hours every day except Sundays and feast days.
It's meant to be uncomfortable. That's the point of it. It's not something that, you know, is meant to give one pleasure.
We do something hidden that nobody sees, that we don't complain about, that doesn't bother us very much, and we offer that to God. Now, why that should bother someone so much, I really don't know.
This is the nature of the spiritual quest. It tends to lead people to do things that from a secular, modern point of view are difficult to understand and in some cases are a little repulsive.
There's an even hotter issue. The most incendiary charge leveled against the group, that Opus Dei is a cult. In recent decades, Opus Dei has been confronted with disturbing allegations that they are a dangerous cult. Virtually all the criticism is focused on the lifestyles of the deeply faithful numeraries who live in Opus Dei centers. Their mail is screened. Their media choices, books, films, and entertainment, need approval.
It's a controlled environment. It's an environment in which you're seldom by yourself. I started questioning in my own mind to what extent Opus Dei exerts influence and controls your life and your thinking and everything.
It was a fear of hell that allowed me to stay for so long. I've been told this was a divine vocation, and within the context of the church, if you abandon your vocation, you go to hell.
To have blind obedience and you're getting to the point where you don't question, there's where the cult difference comes. That's where it can get destructive and it's harmful to the individual.
How sad for a 17-year-old girl to give up her whole life, her whole family. For God, yeah, but for what?
Joining as a teenager in 1985, Colleen O'Neill cooked and cleaned as a numerary assistant at several Opus Dei centers across America.
When I joined Opus Dei, I was told you can't call your family and you can't visit them. And we don't make long-distance phone calls and we don't go visit them. So I was like, okay. And so I didn't do that.
When one takes on a commitment, especially if one has a celibate commitment to go anywhere and do anything for the service of God, that they may not be as available to their families as they were in the past.
And my parents freaked out, like, what the heck is going on, you know? How come you're not calling us? How come you're not visiting us?
When I hear these stories from parents of children that have joined Opus Dei and that have been cut off from their parents, I'm horrified. I mean, that is not what the Catholic Church is about.
Opus Dei denies that members are entirely cut off from their families.
They have another family too that they have acquired by free choice. They have commitments to that family and they have to balance them like any married person who gets married and has to balance two families.
Despite some building doubt about her life commitment to Opus Dei, O'Neill faithfully served her vocation.
I'm in this forever because you think God called you to this and you know, come hell or high water, you're going to be faithful. You're going to stick it out for the rest of your life.
When you're dealing with the cult dynamic, there's total control of information, not only externally in the physical environment, but there's internal control in terms of one's communication with oneself.
You don't have the psychological freedom to leave, and that's almost like being in a prison that you don't know you're in, and you can't get out.
After 20 years inside Opus Dei, O'Neill made a traumatic decision.
I learned, hey, I'm under mind control here, and this just isn't right. And if my vocation was not from God and is not supernatural and divine, then what am I doing here?
In April 2005, O'Neill disappeared. Local police and the FBI thought she had been abducted. Actually, she was secluded in a hotel with a cult interventionist, hired by her family.
Colleen was a very typical intervention. She was disturbed inside, wanting to have some freedom, but at the same time not wanting to leave the group, not wanting to leave doing God's perfect will in her vocation.
You give up your life, you give up any money, you give up everything, absolutely everything. And once you're in, you're constantly reminded you gave everything to God.
It's true that there are people who have suffered because the question of vocation is often a question that involves the deepest, most intimate part of their being, and it's a tough question. And I really sympathize with them because at times they can put their whole life into a task and then they see it's not for them.
These are the Di Nicolas, Mother Diane and daughter Tammy. In 1987, Tammy was a freshman at Boston College, where she was recruited into Opus Dei and spent 2.5 years as a member.
When I was a member, I was required to fill out a statistical sheet about all the people that I was working on to join, and I had to hand that in every month and check off, you know, has this girl been to confession with an Opus Dei priest? Have you talked apostolically with her?
Tammy, like Colleen's family, used a cult interventionist to help break away.
The tragedy about Opus Dei is that they transform people into almost like their own robots in some ways, where you become so disassociated from your true feelings and who you truly are, that you can shut out the people that nurtured you, that raised you, that love you.
In a crisis of conscience, her mother Diane began to connect with other Catholic families.
I'm just a mom who wanted to spare other families what my family went through. It was life-altering. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
In 1991, she created ODAN, the Opus Dei Awareness Network. Her message of education and support has been amplified by the internet, providing a forum for thousands.
We don't have millions of dollars. We're just a grassroots organization. And all the people who have been hurt by Opus Dei, the people that we thought we were a family of one back in the 1980s, the web is a tool for the truth. Finally, we have this thing that connects us.
She is trying to get people to look at some of the problems with the organization, and I think in many cases she has a point.
A large proportion of the members of Opus Dei don't have that experience, and that's why they hear these things. They say, well, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Opus Dei denies the disturbing cult charges, but they acknowledge that over the years there have been bruised souls.
There certainly must have been instances in the past when someone did not perform in the best way possible. But I do think that on a whole, people are trying to do their best.
I would like to express sorrow for any hurt that we may have offered to anyone, and sympathy for what they suffer. But at the same time, one has to understand it's a complex situation, and it's not something that I think the blame is easily fixed on one thing or another.
But these complex situations are compounded by what observers claim is a historical tendency for Opus Dei to conduct many of its affairs in secret. There are many people, holy people, who don't understand your way. Don't strive to make them understand. It would be a waste of time and would give rise to indiscretions.
Escrivá was so, I would say, almost paranoid about protecting the identity of Opus Dei. He was very, very leery about any kind of collaboration with any other groups in the church on the fear that Opus Dei would be assimilated to one of these other groups.
Opus Dei's financial affairs are also a private issue. There have been long-standing concerns about the size of its wealth and how that money influences the Catholic Church.
Usually what conspiracy theorists will say is that Opus Dei had come in, for example, with bags of cash to bail out the Vatican Bank because of its crisis in the late 70s.
In his revealing book, Opus Dei, Allen, with an independent church financial analyst, followed the money by examining thousands of documents, along with public records and paperwork submitted by Opus Dei.
The practical reality is that Opus Dei simply does not have the bags of cash that a lot of people imagine it does. If you look at the financial profile of Opus Dei, their total assets is about $340 million. Their total worldwide assets, the best estimate, is about $2.8 billion. Now, you compare that to a group like the Knights of Columbus, which is almost entirely an American organization, has a financial base that is some 3 times larger than Opus Dei. And yet nobody thinks that the Knights of Columbus are scheming to manipulate the election of the Pope or to control the inner workings of the Vatican.
Despite controversy and opposition, Opus Dei would be embraced by the Catholic Church when a popular Pope would grant it a special seal of approval. In 1978, an enormous media superstar for Catholicism emerged with the election of Pope John Paul II. This dynamic new pope was to become a geopolitical force.
This is a pope whose driving cause in Poland was the Solidarity movement, seeing labor as a way of not only toppling the Soviet system, but of redeeming the human person. So he had this fascination with the spiritual meaning, the spiritual significance of work. I think the same fire in him that led him to embrace solidarity in Poland led him to embrace Opus Dei in the Catholic Church.
John Paul's admiration of Opus Dei's mission would bring an unprecedented papal endorsement. In 1982, he established Opus Dei as the Church's only personal prelature, the legal distinction for which Father Jose Maria Escrivá had tirelessly worked for decades.
So what a personal prelature does is, the members of Opus Dei, if they're spiritual care, their unique program of prayer, they are under the jurisdiction of the prelate, in effect, the bishop of Opus Dei, rather than the bishop of the local diocese.
Opus Dei had their own seal of approval, rapidly achieved in 54 years, warp speed in the church's life. For some church observers, this status signaled special favor.
As the only personal prelature, it elevates Opus Dei over all the other lay organizations and lay institutes in the church. And I think one of the big questions is, why is that needed?
Then, in 2002, in a St. Peter's Square ceremony attended by 300,000 people, this small-town Spanish priest became Saint Jose Maria Escrivá of the Roman Catholic Church.
It was very important to Opus. Opus, in a number of ways, is a very fragile organization. It exists really on the edges of Catholicism in this sense, that there's no other organization like it. It doesn't, not got a structure that many Catholics recognize. And secondly, it had this spirituality which had been subject to so much criticism.
Despite Escrivá's elevated status in the church, his cause for canonization drew pointed criticism.
Escrivá pretty much leapfrogged over a lot of other candidates, and you have to wonder how much of it was as a result of the influence of Opus Dei in the Vatican.
He was given a priority, probably with the blessings of the Pope, who was a great benefactor to Opus Dei, liked Opus Dei. And again, there's nothing unusual about that. There's always priorities.
The making of a saint is a complicated and costly process. It involves tribunals, comprehensive reviews of a candidate's life, their writings, miracles performed, and testimony from their contemporaries. Some say Escrivá's tribunals were incomplete.
I think it violated the canons of objectivity, fairness, and perhaps violated the integrity of the process itself. When you conduct these tribunals, you must, under canon law, search out and find critics of the candidate. Well, 11 critics wanted to appear. Only one was allowed.
One voice whose testimony was silenced was Maria del Carmen Tapia, a former Opus Dei numerary who worked closely with Escrivá on a daily basis.
One of the main things of him that I have said many times, that he was ready to tantrums, and it's true. He was able to have a tremendous reprimand, so to every reaction. He was very impetuous, he was very impulsive.
But historically, becoming a saint hasn't been about perfection. It's about spiritual transformation.
Saints sin like other people do. They live the same lives as we do, or live in the same world, but their insight into what life is all about is different.
Some of the most popular saints historically have been people whose lives you wouldn't dream of imitating. It's not just possible to imitate them, and yet there's more devotion to them. Escrivá is not an untypical character, frankly.
Escrivá diceva, era santo.
Escrivá said the saint is not a Christian without faults. It is the Christian who struggles against his faults until the very last moment of his life. It has been written that every institution is the lengthened shadow of one man. For Opus Dei, Saint Jose Maria Escrivá's epic odyssey from a vision to a global following has left a formidable footprint.
I think that when the history of Opus Dei comes to be written, it's going to be one of the exciting stories in the history of expansion of an institution in the Catholic Church.
Opus Dei wants to grow. We think we have a message that society wants to hear. We want to get our message across.
No wonder that Opus Dei ends up being in the Da Vinci Code. And no wonder it becomes a metaphor for secret and threatening societies. They've created that themselves. They can change it.
It's the same today that it was 50 years ago. For God's sake, if they have to survive, they have to change. Because life is a constant change.
Certainly we learned many things over these last 50 years of doing Opus Dei in the United States. We're doing a lot better, we're learning many things, and I hope that problems will diminish.
Opus Dei is saying that the conversion of the secular world can't be done by a caste of people wearing Roman collars, standing on the outside and wagging their fingers at it. It's got to be done by lay people who live and move inside that secular world. That is the perennial challenge facing the church. The jury is still out on whether or not it's actually going to work.